Chapter 9. The Creator's Greatest Gift. Childhood Love. It was with childlike joy and inspiration that Anastasia began telling me about the Vedrus rite associated with the energy of love. The activities of the Vedrus people amounted to a continuous learning cycle. It was a great and joyous school of conscious being. All Vedrus celebrations could be described as tests of mind and skill. They all involved, one might say, reminders to the adults, as well as wise lessons to the young. But even during the days of intense harvest gathering, the Vedrus people worked with a joyous heart. Their work was imbued with meaning that went beyond material creations. Look, Vladimir, see, it is hay-cutting time. A magnificent, clear day. The whole settlement, from the littlest ones to the greatest, is heading out to the meadows with the first rays of the sun. See, there go 2 drays carrying a whole family. Only the elder family members have stayed behind to keep the household animals company. But the guys, the young lads, are riding horseback, with only collar bands on the steeds and long lengths of rope in their hands. On these horses, they will use these long ropes to cope with the task of dragging the stooks of hay over to the main stacks. The stately muzhiks, which English plural of muzhik, stress on the last syllable, the Russian term for a hardy male peasant or rural dweller, in their carts hold their sides poised, blades up, while their wives and older children sit beside them with their rakes, ready to start raking up the hay the men will be cutting. Also riding on the drays were some very small children. What for? Just for the fun of it, out of curiosity, to mingle, frolic and play, and to observe the grown-ups on this day. The people are by no means dressed in rags. See their clean white shirts, and the women wearing flowers entwined in their braids and embroidered dresses. Why are they dressed up in their best, as if going to a celebration? The answer, Vladimir, is that they are under no constraint to actually cut hay. They all have their own piles of hay back in their respective domains, though naturally it does not hurt to have some community stacks in reserve. The main thing, however, the tacit purpose behind all the general activity, is to show themselves at work in their neighbours' eyes, to steal furtive glances at each other, and to give a chance to the young guys and girls to get to know each other in a common activity. That is why the young people, even from outlying communities, are so happy to turn out for the haymaking. Now it has begun. Look, the scythemen are moving forward steadily, all in a row. Not one of them must fall behind. Their wives are raking up yesterday's cuttings to be dried, singing as they work. The young people gathered the dry hay in stooks. Those slightly older will build the haystack. See those 2 guys standing on top of the haystack? One of them is 18, the other 20. They are piling the hay on the stack, which those 6 smiling girls are handing up to them. The guys have taken off their shirts. Perspiration is streaming down their tanned skin, but they are trying to keep up with the merry girls. There are 2 guys up top, and there ought to be 4 girls throwing up the hay from below, but it turns out there are 6 of them down there, laughing and joking, trying to drown the lads in hay. The guy's father comes over to the haystack to get a drink of water. He's quickly sized up the whole situation. His 2 sons are trying to keep up with the 6 girls. They simply cannot afford to get done in. Besides, in the group of nimble, laughing girls below, there may be 2 brides for his sons. After taking a drink, the father calls up to his boys. "Hey there, boys. I don't feel like cutting any more for now. How about I climb up there and help you, seeing as how there are 6 down below instead of 4? "Why, father?" answered the elder son, not slacking off for a moment. "There are 2 of us up here stacking hay, my brother and I, and we haven't even got warmed up yet." "It's as though I'm still asleep," added the younger, as he somehow inconspicuously wiped the perspiration from his brow. Down below, the light-headed girls took notice of his movements. One of them called out over the general laughter, "Watch out, don't let the sleepyhead get wet." The father broke into a smile of contentment before rejoining the row of scythemen. The train of 4 steeds, which the young men were leading by the bridle, was on its way to the haystack from the farthest meadow. The last horse was led by the youngest, whose name was Radomir. He'd turned 8 just before the start of the summer, and was now in his 9th year. But the boy, Radomir, was very well developed for his age. But it was not only his physical height that elevated him above his peers. He had a quicker grasp of knowledge than did the others, and he excelled in festive games. And here at the haymaking he swelled with pride at having been given work usually assigned to kids just a bit older. He was in no way going to lag behind his elders. He himself was trying to bind up the stooks as quickly as possible, and the horse obeyed him. Even though he brought up the end of the train, he was still not lagging behind. Just a little distance away, a chorus of younger children could be heard in play, over by the edge of the forest. As soon as they took notice of the train of horses dragging the stooks, they rushed over to catch a ride on them. The kids rushed headlong to their goal. Only one little girl, barely 4 years old, lagged behind. The others had already reached the stooks when she took a mind to try a shortcut and anxiously started running across a swampy stretch of ground. This small swamp had almost dried up, but one could still find patches of elevated ground dotted around. The dear girl jumped from hillock to hillock, very close to the horses dragging the stooks. All at once, however, trying to jump to the next patch of ground, the girl slipped and took quite a fall, scratching her knee badly on a stick and getting her dress and her face all muddied in the process. She picked herself up, but fell back at once and started screaming at the top of her lungs, smarting with annoyance at her plight, just as the last of the stooks came by and began to recede into the distance. The stately youth Radomir heard the little girl's cries. Here he found a dear little girl with clothes and hands all muddied, sitting in the midst of a puddle, using her tiny fist to wipe away the tears and bawling with all her might. Radomir took hold of her under her arms, picked her up out of the puddle, set her down on a dry patch of ground safe from harm, and asked, "What are you bawling for, little one? Is it that bad?" Still crying, she tried to explain through her tears. "I was running, see. I was jumping from patch to patch, trying to catch up, only I took a bad fall. All the stooks had gone and I was lagging behind. Now all the other kids are having fun riding on the stooks and I ended up in this puddle." "They haven't all gone," Radomir responded. "Look, I'm still here and there's my stook. If you can stop your bawling, I'll give you a ride on it. Only you seem to have got so dirty all over." "Now stop that screaming once and for all," he demanded. "It's making me deaf." Radomir took hold of the hem of the little girl's dress. Finding a clean patch of dress, he put it up to her nose and commanded, "Come on, now blow your nose." Completely taken aback by this move, the little girl let out a loud "Ow!" and covered the front of her exposed lower torso with her hands. Now she blew her nose hard, 1, 2, and stopped crying. Radomir let down the hem of her dress and stared with a critical eye at the filthy and dishevelled little girl standing before him. "You'd better take off your dress altogether," he said. "Shan't," she declared firmly. "Take it off, I shan't look. I'll rinse out your dirty dress in the lake. You can sit here in the tall grass while you wait. Here, you best take my shirt. It will go right down to your ankles. It'll be longer on you than your dress." Radomir rinsed the little girl's dirty dress in the lake while she wrapped herself in his shirt and peeked at him through the tall grass. As she sat there in the grass, the girl was struck by a piercing, frightening thought. She remembered once overhearing her grandfather telling her grandmother, "A terribly scandalous act took place in the next settlement. Some good-for-nothing lifted up the hem of a maiden's dress before marriage." "If he lifted up her hem, it means he's crushed the poor dear's life," the grandmother had sighed. The little girl decided that something must be crushed in her too, now that strange lad had lifted up the hem of her dress. She examined her little arms and legs, and even though they seemed to be in working order, nothing crushed, Her fear did not dissipate. If grandfather and grandmother believed that lifting up a dress hem would crush something, then something of hers must be crushed too. The girl jumped up from the grass and called out to Radomir, who had been rinsing out her dress in the lake. "You're a dirty good-for-nothing!" Radomir straightened up, turned towards the girl standing in the grass wearing his shirt, and asked, "What are you carrying on about this time? I don't know what you want." "I'm telling you, you're a dirty good-for-nothing. You dared lift up the hem of a maiden's dress before marriage. You've crushed everything of hers." Radomir looked at the girl's mud-covered face for some time, then burst out laughing. After getting hold of himself, he said, "Well, you've heard the song, but got it wrong. Sure, lifting up the hem of a maiden's skirt before marriage is a bad thing, but in my case, I didn't lift up the hem of a maiden's skirt." "You did. You did. I remember you lifted up the hem of my dress." "Your dress, sure," Radomir agreed. "But then, you're not a maiden, are you?" "How come I'm not a maiden?" the girl asked in surprise. "Because all maidens have protruding breasts, but you don't. Instead of breasts, all you have are two little spots which are hardly noticeable. That means you're not a maiden." "Then who am I?" the little girl asked distractedly. "You're still a little one. Now you just sit there in the grass and don't say a word. I haven't the time to talk with you." Once again he stepped into the water, finished rinsing out the dress, then wrung the water out of it and laid it out neatly on the grass to dry. Then he called out to the girl, "Come down to the water, little one. You need to get your face washed." She came to him obediently and stood quietly while he washed her face. "Now let's go to the Stook, and then I'll give you a ride." "Let me have my dress back first," the girl asked almost in a whisper. "It's still too wet. You can stay in my shirt for the time being. I'll bring your dress along with me. It will have dried out by the time we get to the haystack, and you can change there." "No! Give me back my dress," the girl insisted. "Maybe it's wet, but I'm going to put it on anyway. It can dry on me." "Have your own way. Spruce yourself up," said Radomir as he handed her the wet dress and headed over to his horse. The little girl quickly put on her dress. She rushed to catch up to Radomir at the Stook. "Here I am," she said, panting away, "and here's your shirt back." "Okay, you're my bad luck charm. All the other lads are heading back already, and I'm here stuck with you. Climb aboard." He helped the girl climb onto the Stook. He took hold of the bridle, and they started off in the direction of the haystack. The little girl sat on the Stook in her wet dress, jubilant as it whisked smoothly over the ground. She was riding the Stook all alone, not in twos or threes like the other kids. She sat there all by herself. Her face was beaming with joy, as though she had suddenly been turned into a goddess. If only her girlfriends could see her now, not as part of a train, but all alone. He was carrying her all by herself. She noticed the way Radomir led the horse by the bridle and couldn't take her eyes off his back. Her little heart began to beat faster. She felt a sensation of warmth permeate her whole body. Naturally, she was still too young to realize what was going on. She was in love. Oh, for the love of childhood! It is the ultimate of purity, the precious gift of God. Only why does it sometimes make an early start and perturb a little one's heart? Why? What does it mean when it comes early like that? It turns out that there is truly great meaning in early love, something the Vedras people well knew. Upon arriving at the haystack, Radomir came back to the Stook. "Climb down, little one. Don't be afraid, I'll catch you." Catching the little girl in his arms, he set her down on the ground and asked, "Whose kid are you?" "I'm from the next settlement. My name is Luba Miller. My sister and I are visiting, helping our brother," she replied. "Go on then, go to your sister," Radomir admonished, walking away. He did not turn back even once to look at the little girl. She stood there watching everything, how he untied the rope from the Stook, climbed up onto the barrel from where he could leap onto his steed. Then he took off at a gallop to fetch a new haystack. Love as a fully fledged member of the family. Little Luba Milka returned home with her sister. It was already the family's supper time, but Luba Milka didn't want to sit down at the table. Clinging to her grandmother's skirt, she begged, "Can we go for a walk together in the garden, Grammykins? I want to tell you about a miracle, just you alone." On overhearing his request, the father protested. "It's not proper, daughter dear, to go off when the family's about to sit down to table, let alone take your grandmother with you." But when the father looked into his daughter's face, he broke into a smile. The Vedras people knew the grace of childhood love. They knew how to treat love kindly, to embrace it as a heavenly gift to the family, to refrain from making fun of it, and to respect its every trace. They valued the grace of its great energy, and so the diverse energies of love would come to them with great joy. "You and your grandmother go for a walk in the garden and eat some berries," said the father, feigning an air of nonchalance. Little Luba Milka sat her grandmother down in a far corner of the garden, and right off began excitedly telling her story. "Grammykins, I was playing with my friends there at the haymaking, and they ran off to have a ride on the stooks. I didn't feel like joining them, I was just minding my own business. All of a sudden, this most kind and handsome young lad stops his horse and comes up to me. Yes, indeed, Grammykins, he comes just as close as you and I are right now. And he was so handsome and kind. Here he stands in front of me and says, 'Little girl, I invite you.' No, he didn't say that. He put it in another way. He said, 'Little girl, not only do I invite you, I beg you to take a little ride on my stoop.' And I had a ride there. You see, Grammykins, has something happened with him? Something's happened with you, granddaughter dear. And what might his name be? I don't know. Didn't say. First of all, my little Luba Milochka, tell me the whole story and try to remember the way it really happened." "The way it really," Luba Milka hung her head. "The way it really happened, I took a fall in a puddle. He came along and washed out my dress. Then he gave me a ride on his stook. But I guess he never told me his name. He called me Little One, and when he left he never once looked in my direction." Luba Milka finished her story and began crying. She continued through her tears. "I stayed there, standing there, and watched him go away, only he never looked at me even once, and what his name was he didn't say." The grandmother gave her granddaughter a big hug, stroking her dark blonde hair as though stroking the energy of love within her, and she whispered as though saying a prayer, "Oh, great energy from God, turn and help my granddaughter with your grace. Do not burn her still immature heart. Give her inspiration to take part in co-creation." Aloud, she said to Luba Milka, "Granddaughter dear, would you like this very good lad to always have eyes for you alone?" "Yes, I would, Grammykins, I would." "Then you should not let him come by or see you for 3 years." "But why?" "When he spied you, you were all dirtied by the mud. He saw you as a crying, helpless little girl. This is the impression he still has of you. In 3 years' time, if you yourself make the effort, you will be older, smarter, and more beautiful." I shall try the very best I can. Only tell me, Grammykins, how should I try? What plan should I follow?" "I shall share all my secrets with you, granddaughter dear. If you earnestly try to follow them, you will be more beautiful than all the flowers on the earth, and people will rejoice at your presence. You will not need to wait to be chosen. You yourself will have your choice of lovers. Tell me, Grammykins. I shall do everything you say. Only tell me faster." Little Luba Milka was trying to hurry her grandmother up, tugging impatiently at the hem of her dress. And slowly and solemnly uttering the words, the grandmother told Luba Milka, "You need to get up earlier in the morning. You spend your mornings just lazing around. You should get out of bed, run to the stream, and wash yourself with pure spring water. When you get home, have a little porridge to eat, but you always demand sweet berries instead." "But Grammykins, why should I try doing this all at home if he's not there to see me?" Luba Milka asked in surprise. "He won't see how I bathe in the stream and eat my porridge each morning." "That, of course, is something he won't see, but your efforts will be reflected in your outward beauty, and the energy will be made apparent within. Luba Milka tried to follow her grandmother's advice. She did not always succeed, especially that first year, but on those mornings her grandmother would come to her, sit down on her bed and say, "If you don't rise with the sun and run down to the stream, you will not become more beautiful of this day." And Luba Milka began rising early. But the second year she had become accustomed to the new regime and easily went through the routine of washing in the morning and cheerfully eating her porridge at breakfast. Now the 3-year waiting period recommended by her grandmother was almost at an end. Only 1 month remained. People were gathering at the Kapishk from all around for this season's fair. Luba Miller and her elder sister, Yekaterina, watched as carriages regularly passed by their domain on the way to the fair, and all at once they noticed one carriage pull off the road and approach their gate, where the sisters were standing. And lo and behold, there in the carriage, Luba Milka recognised him right off. There, sitting with the other passengers and holding the reins, was none other than her beloved Radomir, looking just a little older. The little girl's heart began trembling when the carriage came up to their gate and stopped. An older gentleman among the passengers, probably the father, said, "Cordial greetings, my maidens. Please convey my respects to your father and mother and all your elders. We would like to drink of your kvass. We forgot to bring our own along on the journey." Luba Milka rushed into the house, calling out, "They send all of you greetings. Where's the pitcher? Our pitcher with the kvass. Where is it? Oh, yes, it's in the pantry, keeping cool." And off to the pantry she dashed, overturning a pail of water standing by the door in the process. Turning around, she rattled off to her grandfather and grandmother. "Not to worry, I'll mop it up when I come back." Grabbing hold of the pitcher, she ran out to the gate, where she stopped to catch her breath. Restraining her excitement, she opened the gate, walked out with stately stride, and handed the pitcher of kvass to the gentleman. While the father of the family was drinking the kvass, Luba Milka kept her eyes fixed on Radomir, but he had eyes for Yekaterina. When his turn came to be handed the pitcher, he drank up the remaining kvass, then jumped down from the carriage and held out the pitcher to Yekaterina, saying, "Thank you, this kvass was prepared by kind hands." Luba Milka watched as the carriage drove off, then running to the deep far corner of the garden, collapsed on the bench and began weeping bitterly. "Why so sad again, Luba Milka?" Grandmother had come over and sat down beside her. Through her tears, the girl told her grandmother what had happened. "They came to us and asked for kvass, and the boy was there who gave me a ride on the stock 3 years ago. He's even more handsome now. I ran and brought the kvass in a pitcher. They all took a drink and said how good it was. He took a drink too, and then gave the pitcher to Katerina. Not to me, Grammykins, but to her, my rival, Katerina. And it was her he thanked, not me. She's a real dingbat, that sister of mine. She must have been chatting him up while I was getting the kvass. He looked back at her and even smiled. My own sister, a rival, a real dingbat." "Why are you blaming your sister? She's not at fault, you are." "Why am I to blame, Grammykins? What have I done wrong?" "Listen carefully. Your sister made a colourful embroidery pattern which she neatly applied to the sleeves of her dress. You wanted to do everything yourself too, but on your dress the sewing didn't come out straight. Besides, your sister can speak in verse. She's better than anyone at singing Kolyadki. And you're unwilling to talk with any wise man who can teach you to recite and compose verse. The boy you've chosen, no doubt he's a pretty smart lad. He has an appreciation of beauty and intellect." "Does that mean I have to study another 3 years, Grammykins?" "3, perhaps, but it could be 5. Title: True love will most certainly be reciprocated. 10 years went by. One day Radomir was walking through one of the regular holiday fairs with his best friend, who had the unusual name of Arga. Arga had a flair for creating marvellous pictures and doing fantastic wood carvings. He could fashion statues of clay that looked as though they were alive. This was the talent he had inherited from his grandfather. From his father, he derived his blacksmith's art. The two friends took a little interest in the long rows of carts with their vast array of savoury offerings, nor was the young men's attention attracted by the rows of assorted dishes and household utensils. In fact, people did not come to the fair for any material acquisitions at all. The main attraction was talking with others, getting to know them, sharing their experiences with them. The lads decided to head over to the place where they were getting ready for a colourful show by visiting performing artists. Suddenly they heard themselves being hailed. "Radomir! Arga, have you seen it yet?" Radomir and Arga turned around to see who was calling them. 3 young men from among their community friends were standing a little distance away, engaged in animated conversation and beckoning Radomir and Arga to join them. "Seen what?" asked Radomir as he approached. "That extraordinary shirt," answered one of the 3. "It's made from smooth fabric and embroidered with very unusual ornaments. There's probably some secret meaning in them." A second lad corrected him. "The shirt's good, but the girl selling it is much prettier. I've never seen a maiden like that at any fair anywhere." "So where do we find this marvel?" asked Arga. The 5 boys headed over to the carts, displaying jewellery and ornaments, marvellous handicrafting. One cart in particular had drawn a bigger crowd than usual, admiring an exceptionally beautiful shirt hanging on a wooden hanger, rippling lightly in the breeze, and people could see how different it was from the usual shirt cloth, exuding, as it did, a feeling of lightness and tenderness, and the patterns embroidered on the collar and sleeves were extraordinarily delicate and fanciful. "A pattern like that is the mark of an accomplished craftsman," Arga said aloud in excitement. "Never mind the pattern, squeeze your way through to the crowd and see who's sitting beside it," said a neighbour from their settlement. After making their ways around to the other edge of the small crowd, the friends managed to approach the cart and catch a glimpse of the maiden. Her eyes were blue as the sky. Her dark blonde hair in a tight braid was tied. Her eyebrows were like 2 brown arches. Her lips betrayed just the faintest hint of a smile. Her movements were gracious, but seemed to be entwined with some kind of energy. It was some time before the lads could take their eyes off the maiden. "She's clever with her tongue, too," the tallest of them quietly observed. "She can speak in verse and comes up with witty sayings," another added. "She's kind of tender, but as aloof and inaccessible as a high cliff. Try talking with her." "I can't," answered Radomir. "She's taken my breath away." Arga spoke to her first. "Tell me, fair maiden, are you the one who crafted this magnificent shirt?" "I am," the maiden replied, without raising her eyes. "I wove this shirt to while away the boredom, to make the winter nights shorter. Sometimes I would do some embroidery at dawn." "And what kind of price are you asking for your handiwork?" Arga inquired, so that he could keep hearing the maiden's tuneful voice a little longer. The maiden raised her eyes to look at the young lads, and it seemed as though her gaze was carrying them away into heavenly heights. She let her gaze rest just for a moment on Radomir, thereby dissolving him, as it were, into the blue. From that point on, he felt as though he were in some sort of unusual, unreal dream. "What price again? Let me explain," the beautiful girl sitting on the cart went on. "I can give this piece without payment only to a kind and courageous young man. I shall ask only something trifling for myself as a souvenir, a colt, for example." "What a beauty she is, and such a worthy reply! She's a true master!" Loud exclamations could be heard from the crowd. "A colt, she says, just a trifle. Yes, a real beauty, all right, no doubt about it." The exclamations went on, but the crowd did not move along. Then suddenly the whole throng divided into 2 halves. There was Arga, leading a dun-coloured stallion by a halter rope. The steed was unbroken and hot-tempered, and kept bucking and prancing on the spot. Whispers spread through the crowd. Now that is quite a horse, such a marvellous steed. Could a fine young man have decided indeed to give it away? Argan approached the cart and said, "My father gave me this steed. I offer it to you, my beauty, in exchange for the shirt." "Thank you," the maiden calmly replied, "but I did say that, and people heard me say that the shirt is not for sale. I can only give it away to you, or perhaps to some other young man, fine and true." "Aha, the beautiful maiden is frightened!" Mocking voices rose from the crowd. "Of course the steed is hot-tempered and too flared up to handle for many a young man. A while ago she was expecting a tame and gentle mare, and now she's got cold feet. See, she's given up the game. So anyone should be careful. It's a downright shame when a steed is unbroken and hot-tempered." The maiden looked out at the crowd with an artful smile and jumped down from the cart with an amazingly lithesome style. At this point, all the exclamations from the crowd ceased at once. The girl's torso was absolutely stunning, as though refined to perfection by a master artist. She stood before everybody, standing around in all her beauty. Smiling at the steed, she took 3 steps in Argaz's direction, seemingly floating toward him, barely touching the ground. Completely taken aback, Argaz suddenly let go of the halter rope. The hot-tempered stallion reared on its hind legs, but the maiden managed to catch hold of the rope with her hand, and then, to everyone's amazement, her left hand deftly squeezed the stallion's nostrils. Letting go of the rope, she began caressing the steed's nuzzle with her right hand. The hot-tempered stallion all of a sudden calmed down. She inclined his head toward the ground. At first he put up some resistance, but eventually began bowing to the ground, lower and still lower, and then the steed suddenly fell to its knees before the maiden. A grey-headed oldster stepped forth from the crowd and said, "Only the wise men know how to tame a beast like that, and not even all of them. But you are still a young maiden. What is your name, and whose girl are you?" "I am Luba Miller from the next settlement." "And whose am I?" "Nobody's. I am simply the daughter of my father. And here he comes, that strict father of mine." "If only I had been strict," said the father, who had just come back to the family cart. "What have you been up to this time, my little gal?" "Nothing much. I've just been playing a bit with this little colt." "A bit, I see. Let the steed go. It's time we got on the road home." Title: Love, too, was teaching in the Vedrus school. What had happened to Luba Miller during these years? Where had she learnt such wisdom and agility all of a sudden? In the Vedrus school. People studied their whole lifetime in this school, from their early childhood to their most advanced age. Every year they sat for exams. The school programme had appeared right at the beginning of creation, in all its minute detail, and then become further enriched over the centuries. The wisdom was imparted unobtrusively. The lessons were not at all like those in your contemporary schools. You once told me, Vladimir, about a certain expression used in your society, when it turned out that a child is mischievous and rude and bad habits show up in him. People would say that he was brought up by the street, that he's been granted too much freedom. The Vedrus people had no fear about granting freedom to their children. It was common knowledge that the system of festivals and rites was so intricately and skillfully thought through that all children were absorbed in penetration for them. Even though it seemed as though they were playing, they were actually teaching themselves various disciplines, often without the help of adults. Examinations in the Vedra school were like one festival or celebration after another. With their help, the adults taught the children, and they themselves learned from the children. Take the festival of the Kolyadki, for example. During the festival days, children walk about and sing Kolyadki to all their neighbours. The verses and melodies, along with the accompanying dance movements, were all composed by the children themselves. Children started preparing for their performances long before the start of the festivals, eager to learn from adults, their families, their peers, and the wise men as to the best way of mastering verse composition, along with singing and dance movements. Not all children had the same abilities, of course. Those that were not as quick to learn as others would ask their parents to tutor them, and sometimes parents found they could use their children's thirst for knowledge to draw them into helping around the house and grounds. A little boy might badger his grandmother, for example. "Grammykins, dear, read some verse to me. Please do read, I beg you. I don't want to fall behind and be worse than the rest. My friends might not take me with them to sing Kolyadki next time." And the grandmother would answer, "Oh, I've quite a bit to do. Perhaps you could help me, and then I will be able to read some verse this evening." The child would be eager to help all day long, and afterward would listen intently to his grandmother and try to memorize all her verses or songs, and implore her to teach him the appropriate dance moves. Then he might implore his grandfather and perhaps his mother and father too to tutor him just a little bit more, and he would be grateful to his parents when they offered him a lesson. Compare this approach, Vladimir, with the lessons children get in schools today. In literature, let us say, you are right, there is absolutely no comparison. The Vedras children aspired to become poets themselves, right from a very young age. The parade of merry festivals in the Vedras period was a system that helped people learn about the order of the universe and in turn teach their children the simple wisdom of life. The wise men were itinerant teachers and sources of information in regard to what was going on in the world. The Bayans and bards, too, not only reminded people of events of the past, but gave portents of the future, commending the world of marvellous feelings or reprehending unworthy ones. Such lessons were constantly taking place in every settlement, but nobody would ever compel their children to attend. It was felt that each teacher himself should attract children's attention to the stories of science he was planning to tell. Over the centuries, rules such as these helped perfect the abilities of the wise teacher men. You asked, Vladimir, whether any wise men teachers, in an effort to attract children's attention, would simply play some sort of game with them instead of actually giving them a lesson in science or the arts. Indeed, if such a thing were to occur, the wise men would be relieved of the wise man's status. In talking with their children at home, parents would perceive right off that the children had not been properly taught. News of his dishonourable conduct would be made known in other settlements, and no matter what community he thought to visit, he would probably be asked to leave. Before the appearance of love within herself, the little girl Lubomilka made no attempt to attend the wise men's lessons or listen to the songs of the bards and bayans. The parents would not have forced their children to attend, but might drop a surreptitious hint at an appropriate occasion. It was love that enfolded little Lubomilka in its energy. In Vedras families, the appearance of love was greeted as a new member of the family sent by God to help them, and they knew how they could, in harmony with love, make the little girl's life marvellous. This is why the grandmother advised Lubomilka to go and study with the wise men, not just to study for the sake of studying, but with a specific purpose, to become the very best she could be for the one she loved. Lubomilka consented and decided that the next time a wise man presented himself, who could teach people to sing songs with a beautiful voice, she would indeed go to see him along with her friends. But the wise men they needed never came. Lubomilka decided she would simply go listen to the next wise man that showed up. She did and began to listen to his lecture. This wise man began talking about the specific function of various plants, the fragrances these gave off, and about how plants could be used to treat man's diseases. What do I need this for? Lubomila thought to herself. Indeed, this is neither here nor there. Everyone knows how to treat. Mama, grandmother, sister, they all know. And even if I should learn more than anyone else, how about the various herbs? How will that be noticed by my intended? He'll never notice it. So Lubomilka listened to the wise man without paying too much attention. She sat there on the log simply for her girlfriend's company, and sometimes she would get up, walk out, and wander about the little glade. She was glad when the wise man ended his lecture and everyone made ready to go home. Then, all of a sudden, the elderly wise man turned to Lubomilka. "Tell me, little girl, you did not find my presentation interesting?" It's really of no use to me. It does not fit in with my secret aspiration," little Lubomilka informed the wise man, almost in a whisper. The wise man teacher broke into a faint smile. The perspicacious old fellow knew all about the little girl's secret aspirations and remarked, "You know, little girl, you may be right. I can allow that this knowledge has nothing to do with you right now. After all, you're still pretty young. But for older girls, I explain how they can become beautiful and create a space of love for the one they love. When he sees this space of love, he will definitely want to know who was able to co-create such beauty. And he will be so excited to meet whoever steps forward as its creator. I shall also reveal to the maidens the secret of how to weave a garland, how to prepare tea of herbs for their beloved, and what to use in washing in the morning to make their bodies smell flower scent. I shall further be explaining." Little Lubomilka listened to the elderly fellow and began to regret more and more that she had not gone to his classes. He stayed in the settlement for more than a week. He revealed to the maidens important secrets which she knew nothing about, and Lubomilka asked the wise man, "Are you going to be staying much longer in our settlement?" "I shall be on my way in a couple of days," he responded. "In a couple of days?" The little girl could not hide her disappointment. In 2 days. Then I would kindly in 2 days. Then I would kindly beg of you to spend your last 2 nights with us." "I've already accepted invitations to other homes," responded the wise man. "But if it means so much to you—" "Yes, I very, very much need to learn from you about the different herbs." Each evening the old wise man spent his whole time talking with the love-smitten Lubomilka. He knew that the inspiration of love would help this little girl grasp the essence of the subject in a day or so, while even a year might not be enough for some others. When it was time for him to leave, Lubomilka escorted the wise man to the outskirts of the settlement, and he told her, "After me, another wise man will be coming here. He will be talking about the stars and the moon in the skies, about the sun and about worlds invisible to our eyes. Whoever succeeds in understanding him will be able to light a guiding star in the skies for her beloved, and that star will shine for them both forever. Then along will come a wise man who knows how to tame beasts, indeed, how to render even the most headstrong steed obedient to your beloved and a faithful friend to him. A bard, too, shall be coming to you. He knows how to write verse and come out with such songs that many people will fall in love, first with the voice, then after that everything expressed in the song, and he can also teach dance. Tell me, please, which wise man should I not bother going to hear?" Lubomilka suddenly said to the old fellow. "After all, I can't spend all my time listening to wise men." Once more the old fellow, cleverly concealing a smile, answered the girl in all seriousness. "Yes, you are right. If you go hear all of them day after day, then there simply will not be time enough to play. You do not need to go and hear every single one. Why, for example, would you want to learn how to draw or embroider clothes with ornaments and imbue them with meanings that only your heart knows? Why would you need this kind of teaching if you have an older sister, and she, I believe, will turn out to be the unsurpassed master thereof? And why would you, for example, go and learn how to instill feelings of kindness in a shirt you sew, a shirt that will protect its wearer from many ills? or learn how to make fresh porridge with love for your dear ones, which will satisfy not only their flesh but their soul as well. The taste of that porridge will be unsurpassed, but that is something that can be done to perfection by your sister's friend who lives next door. And then you want to obtain a beautiful, and when you want to obtain a beautiful dress or shirt to present to someone as a special gift, a gift that will arouse everyone's elation, you can always ask your sister, and she will come up with a marvellous creation. And if in the end you want to treat someone to an extraordinary dish of porridge or kvass, you can always ask your sister's friend. I shan't ask anybody, Luba Milka suddenly blurted out, even stamping her foot, quite forgetting herself. Those are my rivals. Rivals? In what way? The old fellow asked in all seriousness. And Luba Milka did not blush, but responded, There's this boy, he's the best of the bunch. Only he doesn't pay any attention to me, 'cause these dingbats managed to grow up ahead of me. They kept smiling at him all the time. I saw it when they danced their chorovod at the Capiche, and I'm supposed to present him with a shirt my sister made, and kvass prepared by her girlfriend. No way, never. But why should it not be that way? You say he is the best of all the lads. He is the best, that I know for sure. Then answer me, why should not the best lad receive the very best shirt as a gift, and the best porridge, and kvass besides? And the old man paused, and very quietly, almost to himself, he added, I think it is only just for him. I think it is only just for him to have the best bride of all. Bride? Luba Milka's cheeks flushed. Yes, bride, replied the wise man. Indeed, should you not wish him only good? Let him have the best bride of all. Luba Miller looked at the wise man, not able to utter a word. She was filled with feelings which set her on fire, and suddenly she began running off. But after a short distance she stopped, turned round, and cried out to the wise man, I agree! He does deserve to have the best bride of all, and that bride will be me. Luba Milka eagerly paid a visit to every wise man that came to the settlement thereafter. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, and the wise man could hardly believe the surprising questions she asked. She memorized in her head everything the men of wisdom said. In a learning situation, this is possible only when a child not simply attends the classes, but actually comprehends where he will apply the knowledge received. When instruction proves too grueling for the pupil, it can be counterproductive. When a man has a specific goal that can be mastered through the study of various disciplines, learning for him becomes an exhilaration, and the assimilation of knowledge proceeds 100 times faster. And when love enters into the equation, the resulting effect is unsurpassed. Love is capable of scanning the thought of any wise man. Just a few words spoken by the teacher can be sufficient not only to explain the whole subject to the pupil in the blinking of an eye, but even beyond that, to further engage his thinking. Love, a great energy, the gift of God, was paramount in Luba Milka's instruction. Back at home, the little girl followed her mamma and grandmother's dinner preparations with great eagerness. She had them explain all their actions in full detail, and tried her own hand at creating various dishes. And the little one came up with some rather unusual creations. Once at the Maslenitsa, which is a traditional week-long celebration in late February or early March, a group of relatives had come to join in a meal. 2 stacks of pancakes stood on the table, one of them cooked by the girl's mother and grandmother, the other by little Luba Milka herself. The guests found her pancakes much tastier than the others, and this now not so little girl watched from a far corner of the room as her stack of pancakes began disappearing faster than the other. When the whole family sat down to the table on a weekday, grandfather would be the first to taste the cabbage soup from a wooden spoon, and he would say, I know for certain who made this soup. It has a pleasant and tender taste that no one else can match. Hear, hear, the girl's father added. Not only does it contain flowers from unusual herbs, but there is feeling in it. Little Luba Milka found learning the disciplines no chore at all. In her life, she became a craftsman without peer. She herself blossomed into an extraordinarily beautiful woman. From the first wise man, she had learned without realizing it the truth of great love. If you wish to be close to God, become a goddess yourself.